Welcome back to another Biz Bites and Neuro Nuggets,
Yay.
wisdoming the world of work. We are going to talk today about being stuck in our stories.
Mm.
And Nicole and I are both members of the Mosaic Network. It's an amazing network for entrepreneurs to provide support and motivation and education and all kinds of resources and opportunities to collaborate. And today, in one of our calls, we talked about the stories that we can get ourselves stuck in and how sometimes we if we pay attention to what we're avoiding and then we look at what those stories are, we need to like get ourselves out of and kind of reframe those stories or create or tell ourselves a new story. So we thought this would be a really interesting topic to kind of dive into, as I think everybody can relate to this happening from time to time.
Absolutely, and it scares me. I'm a little bit like I have butterflies even thinking about talking. It's a vulnerable piece too of being like, "Oh, man, you feel like you should have it all together and know all the things," but it's a real piece. Like, I was shocked today on the call, and I think you got off a little bit before, but, like, one of the things we talked about too was every single thing everybody said, we all have felt. Like, it was this common thread of every story. Everybody's like, "Yep, been there, done that, have it." So
One of these really great analogies I got the other day when I was journaling was around kind of just the ebb and flow of life. And that
mm,
when we're moving throughout our life, there are times where things are flowing really naturally and everything's kind of working out and it's magical. And then there's other times where things kind of ebb and you notice the difference. And it's in the ebbing that we notice, that doesn't feel as good. What's different? What changed? And that's, I think, where we can get stuck, or at least I can, in those stories and in those, wait a minute, like things were working and then they weren't. And yeah, it's hard to kind of admit sometimes these stories. I've
mhm.
been stuck in the one that I used today, which was that nothing ever works out for the last few years of my life. It's not even a true story, but it's
I know.
um, this sense that like, because there's been some letdowns and there's been challenges and there's been like, oh, it's gonna work out and then it doesn't. Um and or things are like moving and flowing and everything's gonna work. And then all of a sudden it like slows down and there's like this shift and change. And or like often happens, I have autoimmune conditions, so I get sick and then I'm like, see, this always happens. So it like reinforces that story. So that was the one that came up for me. I think that's a fairly common
Oh,
one that other people have, is that things are just never working out for me. Remind me, Nicole, you want to share what yours was today?
mine was that I need other people to help me be successful, that I can't just do this on my own. Like, I've always had a team. I've always had either a business partner or other things, and what I found myself doing is, like, unconsciously reaching out or trying to form relationships that I'm like, "Oh, it's better with 2," which there is. I love teamwork and community, but I feel like I have let it hold me back because I'm like, "Oh, when I have that, then I'll do this."
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's like I feel like there's like wisdom in that, again, in that like you don't notice it until it's gone, or you don't necessarily appreciate, because I was the same way. I had big teams. I was managing lots of people. And then suddenly I was working on my own, writing books and doing my own everything, like all the website building. When you go to be an entrepreneur, there is no IT department, there is no separate group. Like you do every single thing. It is, and you learn a lot in doing it.
Yeah.
And I think that like, yeah, for me, it's like that ebb, like,
Yeah.
oh wow, I now notice how different that is. And I think what's kind of beautiful about that is you get to kind of choose into, okay, I'm going to experience this. I'm going to see what I can do on my own. And then there's lessons and learnings in that.
Yeah.
And then ultimately you get to decide, do I want to do this on my own,
Mhm.
or do I want to do it with other people? And it's a choice rather than a limiting belief, rather than feeling like you have to.
I agree wholeheartedly, and I think if I think back, and like I just was talking a little bit about to you about an incident where I was trying to co-create something with somebody, and I had a little gut the whole time of like, as soon as it talked about LLC, I was like, ugh, but no, it's okay. Like, I didn't listen to that, right? So, I think the thing is, like, and is there beautiful partnerships out of the gate? Absolutely. Did I have a business before that was amazing? Yes. But I know right now my stage of what I'm supposed to be doing, like, God wants me to be like, I need to do some things on my own to show myself I can. Like, and I have been, but not to the extent I know I'm possible. Like the story I've been holding back on, and the belief is like, I need other people. I have to have other people. And it's like, although I like other people, I actually don't need them.
Yeah, I mean, this reminds me too of one of my team members who has a resistance to going on camera
Mhm.
or doing like live recordings or things like we're doing right now.
Yeah.
And I said to her, I said, I'm okay if ultimately you make that choice for yourself, but let's remove the block that's saying I can't or that there's something that's preventing you from feeling like you're good enough to be on camera so that it's actually a choice. If you can
Mhm.
remove that element, then it's actually a choice rather than like I'm dependent on this story or this mindset that I've created for myself.
And as you say that, I'm like, I pictured an anchor, right? Like it's almost our safety of like, oh, I can't and I don't. Versus like you're right. If we can remove that block or peel away the layer, right? Of like, like it's so much more, there's so much power in there because we know. I mean, I'm guessing you have a stat on this, so this might be kind of fun to see. Jessica's neuro nugget. But when you work through that, like, right, I'm guessing that there's something that happens on the other side, right? Like, there's so much magic, and in my world, I can see it. And when people like, or I've just had somebody that she was going to cancel a class because nobody's really signed up for it. She's like, see, doesn't ever work. Nobody ever does it. And I was like, can you just wait until the day of? And if nobody signs up, okay. Well, look what happened. She had 3 signups the day of and she did it. And she goes, it changed something in me. She's like, it literally like evolved something in me to not also give up on myself. So,
So, the way I like to think about this from a neuroscience,
mhm,
neuronegate perspective is that our neural networks, right? They've encoded all of our life experiences, all the things that we've done and we've experienced. And in those codes were things that were meant to help us in some way. So at some point,
yeah,
being a part of a team or a group or community, especially when we were really little, was really important, right? It
mhm,
really matters to have that support or that safety of that community. And so we get these patterns built into our neural networks, and then our brains are kind of always at work scanning our systems, what's going on, everything that's happening, and informing our judgments about what we're doing, telling us these stories
yeah,
that are pre-encoded. And unless we pause long enough to notice, unless we pause long enough to say, is that true? Or is that just something that I've said for so long, or I experienced so long, or I grew up with? Is it something that's just become a neural connection, a pathway, and a pattern that isn't actually serving me or isn't actually producing the results that I want in my life? And that's where we get the opportunity to break through those constraints. Those are the types of things that hold us back from showing up fully, from having more energy, from achieving the things we want to achieve because we're not even aware that the constraint is there most of the time. Sometimes we're aware, sometimes we're not.
right. But I think it's like, and it's not the best analogy, but like when there's, if you're in a dark room and there is cockroaches and you turn on the light and they scatter and go away.
Yeah, yeah, you don't have to look at it. I don't wanna look at that. Well, actually, it's a great analogy because I think that's one of the things that we do when we don't wanna look at something that's bothering us, or at
Uh-huh.
least I'll admit that I do it. When
Uh-huh.
there's something bothering me that I don't wanna look at, I will try to distract my mind and neural networks so that I don't have to deal with it, right? So
Mhm.
that's where we get into behaviors like scrolling social media
Yeah.
or, binging TV shows or, anything that can occupy us so we don't have to deal with whatever it is that's coming up or that's creating some sort of sensation or discomfort. And it's usually not in our head as much as it is in our body. It's usually more of a, who this doesn't Like, our head's loud enough, it usually gets through, it's got lots of stories to tell us, but it's our body saying and the communications of our body that really we tend to drown out more.
Agree, and that's where I think, like, it's that gut check and that piece, like, that's what I've been really tuning into lately. It's like, what actually, like, feels right for me? Or looking back on the day, if something didn't go right, I'm like, I knew, I did know, or if I made a decision that I was like, "Oh." So I think, like, that is that visceral level of knowing and goodness, and then it's also that piece, like, I know, so that story easily I can go back to that same thing because I was like, "I know this is what it's taught me before." So
Yeah,
it's a
and just
fine
because
line.
we become aware of it doesn't mean it's immediately rooted out, right? There's
Yeah.
some work to do there, and we've got practices we use to kind of rewire those neural pathways and make those shifts. But, even in your example, if you think about, your need, and I share this example, right? Like the need for that community or that
Mhm.
fear of kind of being on our own. Well, fear is in our gut and it's trying to protect us
Yeah.
from the fear of maybe not succeeding or not being enough to be able to succeed. And that's all in our identity and who we are as a person. And so if our identity is tied up into being a teammate and being a team player, then what is our identity absent from that? And so then that's where we start to feel that gut like, ooh, something doesn't feel right. Why is this bothering me so much? What's going on here? And that's where you get to invite in that kind of self inquiry.
I love that self-inquiry. That's a perfect term based on all of this too, because yeah, it's like I think the power in today and why we both enjoy the call so much is like, what is the story we're telling ourselves, right? And then when you can flip it and be like, no, actually, like I am capable, I am powerful, or like you said, like, no, it does, things really do. I mean, you wouldn't get to where you're at in your business if things didn't work out, right? So when we put that almost like third party perspective on it of like, okay, but those are the things that hold us back tremendously in business that I think need to have the light shined on them even more because it's like even just talking about it felt so good. I was like, yeah, you're right. Like I didn't even realize I was holding on to that until we entered the conversation about it.
Well, and if we see it, if we believe it, we're gonna see it.
Yeah.
So whether it's not necessarily manifestation, but when it comes to the way that our brains work, we're gonna pay attention to the things that are most hardwired into them. And
Yeah.
so after a number of years, so I'll go back to my example of nothing ever working out for me. After a number of years of hitting a bunch of roadblocks, getting sick a lot, having a lot of health challenges, even though those things weren't, like, necessarily my fault, right? Like, I wasn't doing anything wrong or bad, they were just part of life's circumstances, and I
Mhm.
think sometimes we make meaning out of things that have no meaning, they're just a part of
Yeah.
the nature of life, that sometimes things happen
Ah,
good and sometimes things happen that aren't, and the only choice I think we really get to have in that is how we exist within those different circumstances, because they're just gonna happen. Life's just gonna keep happening, and our only choice is how we're responding to
responding.
or navigating those experiences.
Yeah, and it's all in how we feel about it too, right? You can have one situation and you can go either direction. It can be like, woe is me, or you know what I learned, right? Like I said, when that happened to me with the person I thought I was going to start a new or a side business with, it was like I could have gone down the rabbit hole of like, yep, screw it. Like this is why I'm not meant to be. I'm gonna go work at Costco. And like you can like let yourself get into that realm so easily. But instead, I was like, I went inward and I was like, okay, what am I supposed to learn from this? And it was like, yeah, you are so powerful. You don't need somebody else. Like your journey is actually part of you, like thriving on your own. It's just yeah, it's really pretty beautiful.
So what we have to do is figure out how to make a break, right? Like how to break
Yeah.
the story, because otherwise our story will always reinforce itself. So if we
Mhm.
have this pattern in us, then our brain's going to look for things to support that that story
Yeah,
is true.
yeah.
And so, our brains are going to scan for I'm going to wake up every day like what's going to go wrong today that's going to prevent, what's going to not work out, and so our brains are already primed for those situations. And so it takes some work to shift out of that. And one of my favorite exercises I learned from Cy Wakeman and her reality-based leadership was around editing your story and
Mm,
taking a moment to figure out what's really factual in the story, what are really those facts of the story, and then what would you do if based on the facts, what would be the outcome versus what are you going to do based on the story you're telling yourself, and which result do you want to have happen? And then you can start to call yourself out and go, okay, wait a minute. No, I don't want the story to be for me that nothing ever works out. I don't want to keep looking for reasons that things aren't going to work out or that there's going to be a
you're gonna be a
problem or a
magnet for
challenge.
that.
I want to look for what are the things that are working out. So,
Yeah.
how can I pay attention every day to listing, look at all the things I accomplished? And I had a friend the other night who I was telling her about a day that I had where I was kind of in that nothing's working out mindset. And she reframed the whole day for me based on like things that I had told her and
Mm,
and what I told her was good about the day. And it was like, oh my goodness, actually today was a really great day. Today was super productive. I actually got a ton of things done that was really complex and hard. And it took a lot of time to focus on and get that done. And if I'd had meetings all day or been accomplishing lots of other things, I wouldn't have been able to do that hard, deep thinking work. And so it can be really helpful, I think, to have a partner or somebody else who can mirror back to you and go, "Oh, hold on a second. Like that doesn't reflect what I'm seeing." So you can see things that maybe you're not paying attention to.
I love that, and I think too, our friend Juliet that wrote The Red Thread, like, that's a whole the whole premise of it too is, like, when we look at ourselves from a third party perspective, we just see it differently, but we're so hard on ourselves, and we let ourselves anchor in on those stories so easily. I love that. Like, yeah, because imagine, like, if and somebody said to me the other day, and I don't know why but it was like, "Nicole, if you could only see yourself how I really truly see you." And I was like, what would that actually be like? Like, people say that, but if you actually think about that, it's pretty amazing. It's pretty crazy to but we don't and we can't, but we start to, like, remove ourselves a little bit and have an aerial view, like, I think we can, and like you said, make the break in the story right there, right? Like, that could be the point of when you start to feel that way or go down that little hole, like, what is something that pops in your head? Like, I love that I wrote "make the break." I always take notes when we talk even, so, like, I already have a good page. I love learning from you too.
Well, and I think that when it comes to these patterns, like, if we can tell ourselves a good story, that
Mhm,
same neural pathway behaviors of the way that our brains and bodies work actually work to our advantage. So if I can live in a story where everything's always working out in my best interest,
mhm,
even if it's challenging, right? Even if there are things that come up, because there's always lessons to be learned, there's always growth to be had through everything and every situation and circumstance. And it's interesting that just today I had a just this week I had parent teacher conferences for my twin girls who are going to kindergarten next year. So we're getting kind of
oh,
like an
uh-huh,
update on their progress,
yeah,
and they are doing so good. Like, they're just thriving and doing so well, and, just, like, all around. And for me, it's such a contrast of like, "Oh, okay, you know what? My business hasn't moved as fast, but I've been a very present,
mm,
loving, supportive mother for the
yeah,
last few years." And
yes,
so, recognizing that maybe there's things working out for me that I'm not looking at
aw,
as working out for me, like that my kids are thriving and they really are doing
I can't believe
phenomenal.
that.
And and if I had been in my old job, I would have never been as
Yes.
present,
Yes.
as supportive, or developed the skills, all of these neuroscience-based skills for how to support them, and it's made a total difference. I mean, all of my kids' teachers come back, like, they are so good at handling challenges, they're so good at
Ah,
navigating
yay.
conflict, they can hold their emotions, they can express them in healthy ways, and it's like, "Wow, this is working." Like,
Oh,
this is what it's supposed to feel like and supposed to be.
okay, and do you know what came to me this morning before, I mean, I knew we were talking, but when I was getting ready, my message this morning was like, "This is so crazy." I love all this, but it was like, having a business is like having a kid. It's like when you decide you wanna have a business, it's like getting pregnant and you're like, "Oh, yay, like, I'm gonna birth this amazing thing," and you have no idea what is coming, right? It's like when you have your first baby, you have no idea. Like, it sounds really good and you see other people do it and they make it look pretty easy. And then all of a sudden you're in it and it's like, whew, like there's labor, right? Like there's all the things and you have to learn, like we said, like like all of the things. And then it's like growing your business to me, I was like, is like a child, right? Because it's like you go through the stages and there's really good stages. Like they're doing really well and there's really great and you don't really have worries. And then it's like all of a sudden, like I just came out of the teenage years. I had 4 teenagers and it was hard. Like I wish I would have known you and had some more skills. So maybe can you do a side parenting? Let's
Well, that is one of my objectives, but what's funny is that, like, I have noticed coming from the corporate space, like, running a business is totally different than starting a business, and even though you
100%.
know what it takes to run a business and how to be in that space, it is very different to build all the
Mhm.
components and elements that go into, um, starting something from nothing, and so I agree with you. It is very much like, birthing something. It's a big, commitment, and I always say, for me, it was going back to it was starting at the bottom of the mountain again, where I had to climb the mountain all over again,
Yeah.
because even though I had so many skills and capabilities from all of my past experience, I had to learn a whole new set
Mhm.
of other skills and capabilities. And you know what? Interestingly enough, how funny is it that that my story was, nothing's ever working out for me, and I've literally spent 3 years developing completely new added skill sets that I would never have had or possessed if I had just continued on the same path.
Amen. Like, truly, like that, and I think, like, there's so much in business where it's like you feel like, "I'm gonna get to the top of the mountain and then I'm done," and we talked a little bit about this before, like, I mean, there's always, like, another thing and another level if you want it, right? Some people don't, they don't care, like, they're here, but, like, when you have an achiever or you know that there's more, you're feeding into yourself, right? Like, it's a very unique thing to be like, "Okay, and this is the journey, and I'm taking it the best that I can."
Well, and it's interesting because I spent so much of my life in a story around achievement and tying achievement to self-worth, and never quitting, always working, push yourself as hard as you have to
Yeah.
accomplish your objectives. Like, you
Yep.
just get there, you just
Yep.
go. And I'm really conscious now at this point in my life of saying, of knowing, well, first knowing that getting there is it does not suddenly magically fix anything. Like, you think you're gonna feel so good when just this thing happens, but it never feels as good as you think it's gonna feel. That's not to say that you shouldn't set
Yeah.
goals, because goals are
Yeah.
motivational. They motivate our brain unconsciously once we set
Absolutely.
them. They keep us focused. They do a lot. There's plenty of studies that show when you set a goal, you're 20 to 30% more likely
Mhm.
to actually achieve it. Like, you move towards it because you said it. So it's absolutely worth
Yeah.
doing.
Fuzzy
But
targets
you
don't get hit. Mhm.
but you can't make everything about that.
No. Well, and again, I don't know why this parenting analogy is coming in, but it's like I remember my kids, I had 3 kids 4 and under. I mean, crazy, even more. But I remember thinking once they get to 2, 4, and 6, whew, it's gonna be okay. And then they got to 2, 4, and 6, and I was like, "Holy shit." Like, okay, this is crazy, right? So, and then it was like they get to this stage and you think it's going to be okay. And then while there's good in there's learning in all of it, right? Like I think, and even now my kids they're 20, 22, and 24. Like, even though like I'm not there guardian anymore. Like they're their own people. Like you still have different things to learn and grow and celebrate at that same time. It's like there's never a stagnant thing of like, you've made it.
Well,
Right?
and as humans, that's what we're wired to do.
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah.
our whole neural networks, our whole bodies are built around growth and I mean, evolution in general, right? That's what
Yes,
we
yes.
do is we progress, we push further, we advance, we, conquer the next frontier, whatever it is. And, one of the ways I was thinking about this earlier today was the natural state for a human is growth and evolution. It is
Mhm.
moving
Mhm.
through the challenges, the
Yeah.
experiences, the environments, the things that we're going from, garnering wisdom from those experiences and having that help us to continue to progress on that journey, right? Experiencing that growth. Being stuck is the antithesis of
Yes.
what it means to be human. And so when our capacity, when we feel like we're overwhelmed, we can't handle anymore, we can't take anymore, is at that max or where we feel like there's no more of us, it's because we've grown to the limits
Yes.
that are holding us back. And so if we want to expand further than that, we have to break through those constraints. We have to push past those stories, those beliefs, those misaligned neural networks in our bodies to get to that next stage. And I
Yeah.
don't want to
Yeah.
underplay that that's difficult, but that's how we get there.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's exciting for like the true entrepreneur that like that's what we're wired for, right? Like it's like you know that and you have that. But I love just even having this conversation of vulnerability because it's like, man, like it's not just all rainbows and butterflies, right? Like all of the things that you typically see, people make it look so easy and great. Maybe it is. I have yet to really meet, and I've worked with a lot of businesses. I've not had anybody where it's just been smooth sailing. Like there's always those ebbs and flows. So I think recognizing that, and then yeah, what is the story that we is holding us? Wait, what did we say? Stuck in our stories, right? Like what is it?
Yeah, stuck it well, and I wanna I'm thinking about, like, the kid and the family analogy here because I think it's really perfect. Like, you can't expect a child to be perfect all of the time.
Oh
Right? You can't.
yes.
They're children, they haven't learned the lessons, they don't know yet. They until they realize that the stove will hurt them, they don't know not to touch the stove, right?
Yeah.
It's not that they're purposely doing something bad, they just don't yet know. And that's part of that growth. And when I parent my kids and when I work on this with them, we're always talking about that it's not about what specifically happens, it's about what we learned through the
Yeah.
experience. And did we persevere? Did we get through it? Did we keep trying and giving it another try until we figured it out? And and I think sometimes as adults, we lose that. We lose that ability to say, "You know what? I don't have to be perfect all the time. I don't all have to always have the answer or already possess all the capabilities that I need. I'm still a work in progress and I will be till the day that I die. And in the meantime, what can I learn and what can I grow and how can I expand beyond the things that are keeping me stuck?"
I think that's like our I thought this was gonna be a quick one. We've talked I love this so much, but I think, like, that is where we can even, like, bring this to a close and let
Yeah.
people think about that. Like, that is beautiful. It makes me almost teary-eyed because it takes some pressure off. Like, as somebody who's very A-type Virgo, wants everything, like, in the box, like, that's how I have felt. I have to have this way, and my business has to do this and that, and I'm gonna present this way, and when you can remove that and be like, "Okay," if you even think about it like, "Yeah, a
I'm
child,
just a
they're
work
not
in
perfect."
progress.
Yes, I
And
love
nobody ever
Mhm,
put a label on and said, once you became an adult, you were going to be perfect and have all the answers to everything.
mhm.
Not true, not the case. Nobody does. Everybody
Oh,
has challenges. There's not a human being out there. This is one of my messages for CEOs. There is not a human being in your organization that isn't capacity constrained by something. And if you were to be able to remove that constraint, if they were able to work through and remove what's holding them back, they would be able to deliver and rise to an even higher level of potential than they are
mm.
today. And I think that's what's really exciting about human performance in general and the opportunity to overcome these stories that we get stuck in.
Yeah, we're not stuck. We really aren't. It's what we tell ourselves. And then it's being able to have a conversation, have a person, right? Or have somebody be like, actually, or just like that's the part of the community that I think is super important. And if anybody is listening and you don't like reach out to us, we will chat with you and help you and talk through any of this. Cause that's my thing. Like I believe business shouldn't be done alone. And a lot of people do, they have these conversations that lives in their head and like it shouldn't. There should be an option to have talks like this or somebody to help you through those moments. So
And if you want to, like, throw in the comments, like, what stories are you stuck in, and how could
mhm.
you reframe them? Like, what's a new story that serves you better, that serves you more as that work in progress versus trying to be perfect in some way. So shoot us a message. Thank you so much for listening,
Yeah.
and we'll be back whenever we record another one of these.